Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I am genuinely excited to share this conversation with you. My goal today is to take you behind the scenes of the US healthcare systems, like the mindset, the pressures, the governance, the AI strategy decisions, and then show you what's really happening inside provider organizations as they're evaluating new AI tools and taking their next steps. I hope you walk away with clarity on what the US buyers expect, how the conversation is shifting, and how you can position your company and your products so you're not just another vendor, but a partner that they genuinely want to work with. So, what are we covering? I took a look through the attendee list as the signups came in, and I've tailored today's content to be a balance between the insights in the US healthcare industry, as well as what's important to consider about the US market. And as you find your way in. So I've been part of recommending, pitching, and approving healthcare innovation work for a very long time. And I'd like to share where the customer expectations are today, what they need to make a decision, the expectations and the delighters in your approach that can get you attention. Because I've watched subtly a change recently, and I'll share that and practical, useful advice. So it isn't all just lofty ideas. I want to really be leaving you with actionable takeaways to take back to your teams. So I'm a Kiwi. I've spent more than 20 years inside US health systems, like large hospital groups. I started as an interface developer during that first wave of EMR adoption back in like 2004, which means I was elbows deep in HL7 messages, workflow redesigns long before AI was a topic. I helped implement the one of the very first, or the first, Epic Foundation model system site, and I've done integrations across multiple EMR since. I've worked on the payer data side, health system data, analytics teams, large cloud data strategies, all the infrastructure work that underpins this AI moment now that we're in. So most recently, I served as VP of Data at Orion Health before founding my own US-based consultancy, FMG DataWorks. So now I work with health systems, startups, and AI vendors on strategy, governance, and value. So at my core, I was thinking, I really just, how do I explain myself to you guys? I just really love data. I love understanding how it moves, where the value is created, like where all the opportunity is hiding. And so that's the lens of this talk that I wanted to share with you today. So it isn't like how to sell in the United States session. It's more like an insider's view, like my view of the stuff people inside the health systems are talking about like right now. So I know we've got some polls, and I think we're at the moment where we're doing a new one. Maybe we're not doing a new one. Here we go. So AI and digital health's biggest question. What's your biggest question about AI adoption in US healthcare? This is pretty interesting. Compliance, good, because we're talking about that. Integration in the EMRs, use cases, strategies. Kind of feels like even across the board. So, okay, I think I'm on the right track. Because I want to start here now with some global trends I'm seeing and then talk through how the US healthcare is different to New Zealand, just to frame this up. So every system is trying to move from reactive care to predictive care. Let's prevent sickness in the first place, or at least significantly slow its progression by using all the data we have now from all these EMR installs that we've done. And I just checked, and it's 96% of all US hospitals now. So let's use all that data for action rather than just hand-wringing insights. So we're no longer content with dashboards about what happened. Now we want predictions, right? Recommendations and actions. So there's a shortage of clinicians worldwide and a renewed focus to reduce complexity and give time back to the caregivers, right? Anything that reduces clicks, cognitive load, administrative burden, this all has instant global relevance. And AI governance, it's all about balancing, right? This innovation with accountability. Every country wants to go faster, but no one wants to break the trust. When it comes to governance, the US hospitals want explainability, whereas I feel like New Zealand wants safety and trust. So across both countries, the message is the same. If your product saves time, improves access, reduces risk, like proves value, then you'll have global fit. The organizations that win will be the ones that demonstrate this measurable value across clinical, operation, and financial outcomes. So it's now I feel it's centered around value-based impact. So now let's talk about like New Zealand and the US specifically, because this difference is profound and it shapes everything about how you enter the US market. So healthcare in the US is not a public good in the same way that it is in New Zealand. It's a competitive marketplace. It's investor driven. We have a lot of equity ownership of health systems now. It's ROI focused and it's fueled by growth metrics, right? And stats for regulatory or just, insider knowledge purposes. The New Zealand, though, optimizes for equity and safety and efficiency. The US optimizes now for like market share and volume and revenue. So both countries are facing aging populations, rising costs, workforce strain, but the incentives underneath are completely different. So in New Zealand, the pressures are coming from, I imagine, underfunding and limited capacity. And in the US, it's from complexity, litigation risk, a fee-for-service model that just rewards doing more. So for New Zealand founders entering the US, mindset shift is critical. Instead of asking, how do we help a stretched system run smoother, like you might in New Zealand, you need to ask, how do we help a high cost, high stakes system reduce friction, reduce risk, and protect revenue? So when your product speaks to those drivers, then you become relevant in the US market. So a year ago, every healthcare conference session was starting off with the same question. It's like, is AI all just hype? Like you could practically feel the collective eye roll in the room. And so I witnessed this firsthand, like at Becker's and Hims. Whereas today, that conversation has gone. Like the mood has shifted, and it's like, where do we start and how fast can we move? So there's a reorientation, and folks are like literally gathered at the starting line. McKinsey's reporting a clear industry move from pilots to full-scale deployments. Boston Consulting in their last report said AI as clinical decision support tools will be mainstream in 2025. And the State of AI in Healthcare report that showed AI spending hit 1.4 billion in 2025, which is literally triple the year before. And honestly, I think that number is probably conservative. Most US organization budgets are now just kicking off multi-year AI projects. So we're really only seeing the leading edge of the spending wave. And then I was reading healthcare is adopting AI 2.5 times faster than the broader economy. So yeah, it's not hype. There's like real momentum. So there's still skeptics out there. You'll see them on LinkedIn and they're making noise. Um, but economist Paul Isley explained this better than anyone I've heard. At a session recently, I heard him say, people can't see AI that's already everywhere, so they assume it's not real. And in their mind, invisible equals not valuable. Sadly, he's right. But when I hear that message, I think just you can't be naive and don't be blind. There's plenty of AI that you will never see. And that's exactly the point. You won't know you're interacting with it, and you won't notice when it's making something faster or safer or more efficient. So, because the most powerful AI in healthcare won't be the shiny tools at the front end, it's going to be in the infrastructure, the automation, and the prediction layers, and the intelligence happening silently in the background. And it's already here. And really, if you're not getting underway now, then you're getting behind. The AI strategies are taking firmer shape, budgets have shifted, teams are reorganizing, pilots are becoming more operational requirements now. So most of this work isn't happening publicly, though. The biggest AI shift in healthcare is already happening under the surface. It's already happening inside like the procurement conversations and the budget cycling and the governance committees and the workflow redesigns and all that cloud migration work that we've just been doing. So by the time you can actually see it, it's already been well underway. So these days, when the skeptic says it doesn't look like much is happening, what they're really saying, I'm hearing, is like you're not close enough to the work to notice. And well, that's a bit embarrassing, really. So I'm glad we're talking about this today because I don't want that to be you guys. So to secure funding, especially for large-scale AI initiatives, organizations in the US are creating like formal AI strategic plans. Their boards are expecting it, and these private equity investors and the operational leaders as well. So these plans are forcing organizations to align on a shared vision, like what's our appetite for automation and where does AI fit in to our growth strategy? And then, like, how ready are we? Like, are we ready? Do our employees know what's safe to use? Like, do they need skills and safety training? Is our data usable for advanced modeling? Like, well, what does governance look like for us in our world? What tools will we use and how will we use them? Do we block all AI apps and only approve those that meet security? Or like, will we license by employee or site license for our enterprise? And then thinking about our employees, do we even know what shadow AI tools they're already using and for what? And then what data they're uploading to use them? I mean, these conversations are really hard and they're really necessary at the start. Like I've watched the US conversations have a bit of an arc, and the curiosity and hype conversations were like noisy in public, right? And these strategy thinking and planning conversations are quiet. Like the players are aligning internally to plan their spend, look for alliances and strategic advantage. So let's talk about where agentic AI, like AI that takes on tasks with more autonomy, where is it showing up already inside US health systems? What's interesting is that acceptance is growing, but it's growing like asymmetrically. Some areas are safe and others are still like sensitive. So I want to break it down into three categories we're seeing out there in the real world. Like first, operational and support tools. These are like the easiest for organizations to adopt because they don't directly touch like clinical decision care. Like this is where AI is managing prior auths or processing intake or like automating revenue cycle and billing, or even like supporting HR and marketing. So it's all that digital paperwork and it's sort of removing that busy work out of the system. It's reducing all the bottlenecks, it's speeding things up, and like really frankly, no one misses doing that manual work. So second is that clinical support. And this space is shifting really fast. Like AI scribes are not just creating notes anymore, right? They're formatting them into structured clinical pathways, like diabetes care plans, and they're dropping them straight into the EMR. Like radiology is another big one. AI is doing first pass reads, draft reports, and now second reads to prioritize stat cases. The turnaround time and detection outcomes are like genuinely impressive. Um, and third is the predictive monitoring. This is where the agentic AI becomes most invisible and like super powerful. Tools like Philips ICU platform, they're flagging deterioration an hour before the human can see it. They're tracking subtle declines across multiple machine indicators. And this gives clinicians time to intervene in a way that like simply wasn't possible before, way faster. And this is the evolution from static risk scores buried in a data warehouse to like real-time data-driven intervention at a bedside. So now, of course, patients aren't quite there yet, regulators aren't there yet. So we're nowhere near anything resembling like a digital physician. But the use cases are expanding, and the appetite inside the organizations to explore them is like unmistakable. So now I just wanted to like zoom out and show you like this larger shift that's happening behind all these use cases. Because it's not just that AI is getting better, it's like the entire tech stack's evolving. We're moving from single point AI tools, tools that do like one thing in isolation, towards systems that like weave multiple data streams and tools together into a continuous intelligence loop. And this is important because this is where like the real acceleration is happening. What we're seeing now this year is multimodal data integration and predictive analytics working in a single feedback cycle. So it's no longer just like data and insight. It's like data, insight, action, then learning, and then back to data again. So like every cycle makes that system smarter. Now it's predicting better, responding faster, and it's like connecting more dots than the humans ever could. So this loop is like the real innovation story and to me in this. And it's why the next generation of AI solutions is going to feel fundamentally different. I think we're watching use cases evolve from like isolated tasks like transcribe this or like flag this at the normal lab or like route this message automatically into like these end-to-end workflow redesigns across entire processes. So it's not like do this one step for me anymore. It's like help rethink how this entire workflow could function differently. A brilliant example of this is like patient monitoring and follow-up after a specialist procedure. I'm seeing this a lot over here. Until now, it's been phone calls from a nurse and then coming in for a checkup. Whereas now AI tools are integrating and analyzing data from remote patient monitoring devices and wearables, like a Holter monitor or an insulin pump, and then in real time, and to detect early signs of deterioration. And then they're alerting physicians for proactive interventions. So, like, alerting the patient even with behavioral nudges via like a text, and then automated emails sending tailored patient education materials. And then most probably automated workflows are kicking off to managing the scheduling of that follow-up, all while collecting data and producing analytics on what interventions resulted in a better outcome. So to me, this is like what the new tech stack is looking like in action. So I want to talk about how fast the space is moving because nothing illustrates that shift better than like the arc of ambient listening. So 5 months ago, most ambient tools did one thing. They recorded the visit and then emailed you back a block of text, like a blog. It was helpful, sure, but then it created a lot of work. You had to edit it and then format it and code it and get it back into your EMR. So now, tools like Hardy Health, they take that same conversation and they're putting it directly back into Epic. And it's in Epic structures. So it's formatting it into like a care pathway template. And it can apply the clinical coding on the way in for like diagnoses. And it can send it straight like over to billing in the US. So ambient listening tech has like very quickly become an expected tool for physicians in a clinical setting in less than a year. Like it is literally table stakes. And I'm hearing about how providers are choosing to work at one hospital or another because of who's got what AI tools. So the value of this like goes way beyond the physician time saved. There's billing accuracy and completeness of data is increasing. Encounter documentation, it's way more structured. Diagnosis is faster and data is available for reporting and analytics, like even faster still. Like we're getting close to real time even. So downstream processes and handoffs are like cleaner and also faster. And cash flow can accelerate because, for us, claims are going out sooner. So like this is the evolution. Like ambient listening is moved from like record and transcribe to like an embedded multifunction workflow assistant. And it touches documentation, coding, billing, like form completion. And so that's why I thought Heidi was a really great example of like a multimodal solution doing it really well. Because they understood something I think that lots of vendors miss. And their job wasn't to replace an existing workflow, it was to like amplify it. Like they designed for zero disruption and they aligned with Epic instead of competing with it. So they worked kind of within the grain of the workflow and not against it. And in large US health systems, the systems that have invested tens or maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars, like into Epic, that mantra is always like going to be Epic first, or whatever their EMR is. Like when I worked inside a large health system, I felt that tension like every day. The push to innovate and adopt new tools alongside the need to extract every last ounce of value from the EMR that they'd already invested in. So Heidi fit that dance really beautifully. And they're like a model to think about for how to move fast and respect the infrastructure that you're coming into. So let's shift gears because all of this innovation, all of this agentic AI, and all of this acceleration brings us to one of the biggest structural changes happening inside the US healthcare organizations right now. And it's those AI governance committees. Like there's no playbook for this moment. This is new for all of us. Organizations are building governance structures from scratch, and those structures are now kind of where that real influence in AI adoption is sitting. This might change over time, but right now, like this is where we are. And what's fascinating is like how differently each organization is approaching it. Their size, like investment capacity, like their risk tolerance, like it's all of these like shape and who's in the room for like how these decisions are being made. And really, it can be like a little chaotic because suddenly you've got all these voices coming together for a first time in a really different way. And so there's like, I list them out here. It's a big list. Compliance, like clinicians, you've got your CFO, your CIO, your EMR, like vendors there is representation. You've got an AI strategist now, your AI vendors, marketing's in the room because things are going to look different. You've got customer experience because we've got to like have, continuity there. And then your workflow champions of like, well, how do we actually do these things? So everyone wants to be heard, and rightly so. And AI is risky and expensive, and it's high stakes, and it's deeply interconnected. And you really can't afford to get it wrong in the public eye either. So back in October 24, at Becker's in Chicago, a major health system admitted, like quite openly on a panel, that they had 20 AI pilots running simultaneously at the time, and they expected maybe one or two would survive and go into production. And so that was the reality then. There were scrappy vendors and experimental use cases and like a lone data scientist building a custom data set in the background, maybe a physician champion like piloting the team. And hopefully that team still existed by the time, the results came into that pilot. But that's sort of not where we are today, like at all. Today, the conversation has shifted to like impact, governance, and like risk and scale and ROI. We're talking about security, workflow integration, and like alignment with like real pain points like burnout, capacity, throughput, and access. Like we're approaching these use cases with really broad themes. So the organizations, they're no longer asking like, does this work? They're more like, does this solve the right problem? And is it explainable? And can I scale it across the whole organization? And how quickly? And does it create real value, right? Because this is where I spend like a lot of time with clients right now. It's helping them design the metrics that prove the value and then translate that value into a language that like the budgets and the government boards can really understand. So like gather your baselines so you have something to measure against when the time comes to tell your pilot success story. So one of my clients, and I was with them just this morning, they partner with HR to run a time study before launching a self-serve employee chatbot to be used for their HR Q&A. And so right now they're tracking inquiry volume and response times. We just ran it for 3 weeks. We turned it off this morning. So now they can clearly show the ROI on their AI chatbot once it's gone live. They can use that evidence now to then expand that solution and have other chatbots in other departments. All right. So now we talk about governance. I want to pivot into like the question you probably came here for today is like, how do we actually break into the US healthcare market? So to put a lot of thought into this, and to me, the reality is when you enter the US ecosystem, you're not like swimming in an empty ocean. You're like swimming with sharks, like Epic, Oracle Health, like major cloud platforms like Snowflake, giant data warehouses. These are deeply embedded workflows. There's political capital, and there's like billions of sunk investment. So you're not going to outmuscle them, like you're not going to replace them. And so you really shouldn't try, like especially at the start. If you want to survive and thrive, you need really deep understanding of how your product adds value to what's already there. Like not in a vague language either, like not we integrate slides, but in precise like workflow level clarity. Like where exactly did we plug in? What steps do we eliminate or automate or improve? Like how does our presence make their existing investments more valuable? Like, where do we reduce the friction or the cost or the risk without disrupting anything? Certainly not everything. Because these organizations have spent tens and sometimes hundreds on millions on their tech stack, and they're not going to replace it for you, but they will consider it if you amplify it. Like they'll consider you if you can amplify it, which brings me to one of my like favorite analogies for New Zealand founders entering the market. And it's like, think like a pilot fish. You can't be the shark. Don't try to dominate the ecosystem, but instead position yourself alongside the shark, like feeding off the gaps that they can't reach and like making the shark itself more effective. Like respect its space, work with its direction, and create value because the shark exists, like not in spite of it. So let's expand on this pilot fish idea because it's more than just a cute metaphor. It's like very real and very practical, I think, for like a US market entry strategy. So if you're a tiny pilot fish and you're in the giant ocean, the way you can get the shark's attention is simple. Like lead with your outcomes, not your algorithms. Like US healthcare buyers don't want a technical explanation of your model. They want to know what problem you're solving, how much time you'll save, what revenue will you unlock, and what errors you reduce. So if you can improve throughput, and like how do you protect them from risk? And most importantly, like how do you improve, like prove it? So come with ROI metrics built on US industry standards. Not we think this is valuable, but like value based against baselines that every stakeholder in that room already knows and recognizes, like accuracy rates, industry norm turnaround times for utilization, coding quality baselines, or industry published patient satisfaction scores, like Press Ganey standards, and maybe cash flow impacts. Because there's the truth. You're not selling to one person. You're selling to like that whole room. CFO, compliance, privacy, IT, governance, operations, their Epic team, and now this AI governance committee as well. So every single one of them is listening for their definition of ROI. So tell your story in numbers that belong to their world, not yours. So yeah, Heidi Health, they were a great example of this too. They don't just, in their advertising, they don't say we transcribe accurately. It's a feature, right? No one buys features. They say we increase the timeliness and completeness of documentation, which speeds up analytics, improves billing accuracy, and accelerates cash flow. And so, yeah, that's great. That's a business case. And this part to me is pretty important. Give your customers like the tools to sell your work internally. So your champion, they need the ammunition for getting through their budget process and like past their board. They need like slides and metrics and baselines and value stories from you that they can take straight to the decision maker's inbox. Because if you can help them tell that story, then you stop sort of being the pilot fish hoping to be noticed and you become like a partner then to really help that shark sort of be faster and clearer and more capable inside that ecosystem. All right, so practical tips. When your product enters a US healthcare system, it moves through a really specific adoption pathway. I think this is sort of bigger and more involved than people think. So if you've never sold into the US healthcare systems before, this is probably where reality hits bit. Because the moment your algorithm touches patient data or influences care, the organization's on the hook now, right? Ethically, legally, reputationally. And so there's every stage of the adoption requires oversight and review and evidence. There's committees, councils, and audit and reviews, and like none of these things are really optional. And you're probably not going to skip one of these steps. It can be painful, but I think just for now, because all this is pretty newish, this is kind of how it is. I don't think it'll be like this 2 years from now because we're all going to be in a different place worldwide. We will know and understand things differently, and the technology would have moved and changed. Um, but I really think now this is how healthcare systems are managing the risk, and therefore how they're building trust. So what's important to understand at each stage, there's like different types of questions. At the concept stage, an innovation committee is going to ask you like, does this align with our overall strategic goals as a company? And then the AI council is going to be like, how do you govern bias and explainability and model drift? So but then as you go into a pilot, the clinicians are going to want to know, is it safe? Will it actually improve the workflow? Like, what's the impact on me? And then procurement wants to understand, yeah, ROI again, risk again, and then your vendor stability, and then what are your sort of support plans? And if your pricing model's like confusing, or your evidence is thin, or you can't really articulate that ROI, your deal's going to stall. I mean, you'll get stuck. Security and compliance, they're going to come and they're asking for like lineage and testing reports and audit logs and, what are your privacy safeguards? So you need to like speak back in the US language of compliance. And then when you get to scale, it's enterprise integration, right? Will you be with us long term or are you going to disappear after go live? Because no one wants to be investing in orphan models. So these aren't like obstacles, they're like an architecture, I was thinking, an architecture of trust. So if you can understand this journey and you anticipate the questions at each stage, you're already probably ahead of like 90% of the people trying to enter the US market from outside. And so don't wait for them to ask. Like pre-answer these questions on your website, put them in your pitch deck. And so then when you can demonstrate that you understand the journey, you become de-risked. And really, de-risk vendors are going to get chosen. So say you've made it past all the sharks, your pilot went well, your clinicians like it, procurement's not frowning at you anymore, and security's not hyperventilating, then you finally get the green light and you're like one of those 2 out of 20 pilots that are going live. This is where trust becomes everything. Because once you're in, the expectation isn't that your product works, it's that you can operate safely inside this ecosystem long term. And then this is where I always recommend just creating a simple internal AI governance process and presenting it to reinforce your readiness. And not because someone told you to, but because it signals that you've thought through end to end. And so maintaining clear documentation, buyers want to see that you know your own models, right? As well as they know their EMRs. And it shows like a credible security posture for the US. So even if you're not directly regulated, let's assume your customers just expect best practice. It doesn't have to be complicated, but the moment you can show you've worked through these things, you're instantly just going to look safer and stronger and easier to partner with. So for international vendors, I think especially for New Zealand, this is how you signal like we're ready for US healthcare. So heading into 2026, I think the expectations around integration have also like changed dramatically. Like for the last decade, the big integration question was always like, can you connect the data? Yeah, that's no longer really enough. I think the new question, and the one these committees and leaders are asking is, can you integrate safely, ethically, and sustainably? Because I think every AI tool now sits inside this whole like regulated ecosystem. So I snapped this picture last week as I was walking from the train to the office in Chicago, and I thought it reinforced nicely the expectations, where it's not just an app, and it's part of a compliance framework, like a governance structure, and like a whole risk posture and a workflow and a data architecture. So, like for example, you're not just plugging into an EMR, you're like plugging into the whole system of oversight. And so when we talk about integration now, I think it means something broader. Like first you need to fit into the natural rhythm of how clinicians and staff are actually doing their work, right? So no extra clicks, no more cognitive load, no sidestepping the EMR to another app. And if your tool interrupts the flow, like clinicians really going to reject it like instantly. And so second, I think you must demonstrate like clean, reliable integration with EMR and connected systems. Like health systems just expect tools to support continuous workflows, like not one-off touch points. And third, I think you need to be able to like support safety, compliance, and improve ROI like within that governance framework. So it just means preparing like for that scrutiny, like from all perspectives. And I see this being the new bar, like the expectation for like a next year and beyond. So integration is no longer technical. I tried to sum it up thinking it's more ethical, operational, and strategic. And so then I thought, well, what does this actually look like in practice? So your integration strategy really depends on what you're building, right? Clinical, operational, or niche. But the principles kind of remain the same across the board. You've got to fit into their world, make it smoother, not heavier. So I broke this down into like three pathways. Like for clinical tools, like embed quietly into the workflow. Like clinical integration is the most sensitive space. So your value needs to be precise, like measurable and frictionless. If your product is operational or business facing, this is where you have a bit more room to innovate. It can be about streamlining and replacing legacy workflows or like automating manual work, right? That we still shouldn't be doing. These areas are like high ROI and like high frustration, right? Which makes them some of the fastest paths to adoption. If your product is niche, and like from niche, I don't mean small, I mean like strategically free. You can move faster. Like strategy could be building a plug and play solution or like working in an area with looser EMR dependency, like behavioral health or rehab or a subspecialty. These pockets are often fragmented and ripe for like smart, targeted, like sharp solutions. So like slide into the governance and the workflows and the ambitions they already have, and then help them move faster and smarter with less risk. And I was thinking it's bonus points if you provide skill building to the end users. The race is on, right, to upskill millions of employees in AI confidence, in tools, and safe use. So provide certification and training as part of your product deployment. It creates a shared standard of intelligence, it grows your brand, and that skill building can be like a great strategic differentiator for you. So before I wrap, I want to talk about something that's a strategic advantage for New Zealand, all the New Zealand founders in this room. and something I don't think you're leveraging enough, maybe. Even if you're a little pilot fish, brand New Zealand carries some weight in the US. And it's not all just Middle Earth and merino wool. I think it's built on like strong ethics and transparency and values-led decision making, innovation without ego and nimbleness and straightforwardness. Reputation, like for like high trust partnerships. In the US healthcare environment where mistrust is really high, governance is heavy, and risk is like a dominant conversation, these values aren't soft, they're like strategic assets. So when you show up with strong documentation and all around honest communication and like respectful workflow alignment and clean governance, like zero drama, like a genuinely collaborative approach, you'll stand out. Like organizations will feel it immediately. So my advice would be to keep your product and your brand and your governance and your customer service like all aligned to these like core New Zealand values. Like be the team that's easy to work with, be flexible and supportive and transparent, and like truly do your homework because that combination, I think, of humility and clarity and competence, that's like really refreshing in the US buyer environment. And so I think Brand New Zealand will open your doors if you let it. So I've got one more like perspective straight from the US buyer side. Like people are hungry for solutions right now. Like they're hungry to get ahead and not get left behind. They're open-minded, they're optimistic, but they really need to trust you. So just recently, like last week, I heard the global CIO of Little Caesars Pizza, a massive US enterprise, speak on a panel. I checked last night, actually, they have 4,203 pizza shops across the US in 29 countries worldwide. So she was asked on this panel, what do you want from vendors? And she didn't hesitate for a second. She just blurted out, come with solutions to the problems to my business. Make them simple enough for a 16-year-old after school worker, bring strong SLAs, prove you can do it in a pilot, fast and free, and show me your government's documentation. And the crowd like kind of gasped at that fast and free. But here's the reality. Nowadays, that's a completely normal expectation for an organization of that size. They want simple solutions, fast validation, like low risk of entry for them. They want clear governance, real documentation, and then proof, right? Not promises. And the companies that can deliver that combination, I think they're the ones that are going to get the green lights and they'll be the ones winning the pilots. So as you think about entering the US market, I think that the key would be buyers don't need more hype. They need clarity, simplicity, and proof. And I think if you can bring that with integrity and nimbleness New Zealand is known for, I think you'll stand out immediately.